Welcome to Fight News Now Extra. I'm your host, John Pollock, with John Ramdeen and Robin Black joining me as we discuss a ton of news, including another fighter falling out of UFC 180, Dana White open to the idea of a former heavyweight champion returning, and UFC 182 next January gets a big title fight alongside Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier. The fight is official for January the 3rd. Ronda Rousey will defend the women's bantamweight championship against Kat Zingano more than a year after the two were originally scheduled to fight. The news was made by Ariel Helwani on UFC Tonight on Wednesday, with Rousey and Zingano joining Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier as the headliners at UFC 182 in Las Vegas. Zingano defeated Miesha Tate in April of 2013, but a pair of knee surgeries put her out of action for the next year and a half, with Rousey defending her title successfully against Miesha Tate, Sarah McMahon, and Alexis Davis during that time period. Joe Lauzon is the latest fighter who is off of the UFC 180 card on November the 15th in Mexico City, according to a report from Steven Morocco of MMAJunkie.com. Lauzon was scheduled to fight Diego Sanchez on the show, and the UFC has not confirmed that Lauzon is off, nor any replacement. That has been hinted at, although there is a long line of lightweights that want to fight Diego Sanchez and shouldn't be too difficult to find a replacement even on short notice. UFC President Dana White spoke to UFC.com and discussed the possibility of a Brock Lesnar return to the organization. White, surprisingly, is open to the idea and states if Lesnar wants to fight, he has his number. Lesnar last fought for the UFC in December of 2011 when he lost to Alistair Overeem. Lesnar then returned to the WWE in April of 2012 and is currently under a WWE deal which prohibits him from fighting. And finally, Globo out of Brazil reported the news that welterweight Paulo Thiago has been let go by the organization. Thiago has lost 7 of his last 9 fights, dating back to 2010. He burst into the UFC as a 10-0 fighter, upsetting Josh Koscheck at the time in February of 2009. He last fought for the UFC back in September, where he lost to Sean Spencer by unanimous decision. And we're here with John Ramdeen and Robin Black. And Dana White, on a year where pay-per-view is down, so many champions have got hurt, fights have fallen apart. Shockingly, dude's open to the idea of Brock Lesnar coming back if that were to happen.
Yeah, I find that very surprising because, you know, of course he wants Brock Lesnar back. We're talking about possibly the biggest star in the history of mixed martial arts. People love Brock Lesnar and people love to hate Brock Lesnar, which means the biggest amount of eyeballs tuning into your product. And not only that, Brock Lesnar throws flying knees. When you have a big heavyweight that can throw flying knees, sign me up.
I think there's about a 10, maybe 0% chance he comes back. What do you think, Robin?
Yeah, I don't see him coming back. I mean, you make a great living going and having predetermined outcomes. And in predetermined outcomes, you either go and become awesome and win. And I mean, he is really good at that job. I mean, really intense. He's an amazing performer. The difference is in the UFC, you go and, you know what's not predetermined is how hard that guy kicks you in the head. You know, do you really need to do that when you're rich and successful? And we were talking about it before. It's like for some guys, it's like, I'm already big and famous. I'm already successful. He doesn't even care about that. He lives on a ranch. He doesn't have TV. He doesn't care. Go out and hunt something, chop it up and eat it raw. He's got plenty of money to live that way.
The thing is, the Brock Lesnar, what people have to remember is that he's a martial artist. This guy was a former NCAA wrestling champion, and we've seen over the past number of years, wrestling is arguably the strongest base in mixed martial arts. He has the work ethic. You saw he had the desire to become the UFC champion. Like, he jumped right into the fire against some of the best fighters on the planet with limited experience. I mean, Brock Lesnar essentially should have taken probably years and years to develop because, quite frankly, he was the name. If he had taken the same path that Bobby Lashley's taking right now, where he's the star, you know, it doesn't matter who his opponent is. You put him up against Sal Pelele, people don't give a crap that it's Sal Pelele. They're tuning in to see Brock Lesnar, opposed to putting Brock Lesnar in against Cain Velasquez, who's clearly the #1 mixed martial arts fighter in the heavyweight division, if not the world.
Yeah, I agree, but I mean, I just don't. I'd love to see it, and you're right. Like, some men are driven to compete, but he's been there and he's done that.
He's also 37, and I think this is also very smart on his part when his deal with the WWE is coming up early next year. You don't have a competing wrestling organization to bargain with, so you're using the UFC as leverage. I think it's very smart on his part to at least dangle the idea that he would go and return to the UFC.
Of course, but you have to imagine that conversation's happening with him and Heyman saying, yes, my contract's coming to an end. We know the UFC is lacking stars. They need need a guy like me. Obviously, that in order to get those eyeballs, you need a big star, and you have to expect that they would entertain the idea, because word is he still trains. He still likes mixed martial arts, and he still spends time doing it. I don't know if he wants to do it at the highest level, but it seems that once you're bitten by the bug, it's for life.
You mean people don't always do or mean exactly what they say? You mean Lesnar might be talking about possibly competing because that might help his contract? You mean Dana White might actually not just be really curious how Brock Lesnar may do if he was 100% healthy in the sport of fighting? I mean, people have alternative motives.
Hypothetical questions. They're always great for business. A fight that now has been added, which is going to make UFC 182 and January 3rd a very big night of business for the UFC. Ronda Rousey, Kat Zingano. It joins Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier. I think the immediate reaction is which of these four are going to get hurt before January the 3rd. But should this be pulled off, this will certainly be the biggest pay-per-view since UFC 168 last year. And boy, is the UFC in dire need of a really big blockbuster card, and this certainly represents that.
I agree 100%, but much like Brock Lesnar, Ronda Rousey's the star here. We're looking at Kat Zingano. We all know who Kat Zingano is. The hardcore fans understand that she's the #1 contender at 135 pounds in the women's division. But the fact is, you don't need to have the #1 contender at 135 pounds. You can really put anybody up against Ronda Rousey because they're tuning in to see Ronda Rousey. It doesn't matter who her opponent is. You can have a laundry list of fighters that are in the top 50. But people tune in to see Ronda.
Yeah, and which is why she makes the big money and Kat Zingano will get normal money. And that's fair. That's how things work. Everybody wants to see this woman perform. And it's just that little bit extra for everybody if she's fighting the right opponent. And Kat Zingano earned that.
Do you see Kat Zingano having a way to figure out Ronda Rousey? Or is this going to be just the latest opponent? And can they essentially build up Kat Zingano to where a portion of the audience does believe she has a chance in this fight?
Yeah, I think they'll be able to because #1, her jiu-jitsu game is ridiculous. That is her game, and people can say, Liz Carmouche, she managed to take Ronda Rousey's back, and if it was Kat Zingano who did that, she'd be able to finish the show. We saw the type of punishment that Kat Zingano took in her last fight, so if she can take that punishment, she'll be able to take the punishment from Ronda Rousey. The UFC is good at spinning things, and yes, Kat Zingano is the #1 contender, but she's small and Ronda Rousey's just ridiculous.
Yeah, good work from a promoter standpoint, but Ronda Rousey's going to wreck that woman.
It's Ronda Rousey and Kat Zingano, January the 3rd, along with Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier. More Fight News Now Extra is coming up.